Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in Luke's 18th chapter, and what we're going to review in the 17th chapter is the end time discourse about the kingdom and what awaits and what we can expect in Luke's 17th chapter. Matthew has a similar version somewhere in his, but there's a lot of things that are said in Luke's that aren't said in Matthew's, and conversely, vice versa. But this is in response to a question of the Pharisees. These are the same characters whom he references in one of the parables we're going to read from the 18th chapter. And the nature of their question is, when is the kingdom of Elohim going to come? And he tells them the kingdom of Elohim does not come with intent watching, nor shall they say, look here or look there, for look, the kingdom of Elohim is in your midst. Another way of saying it is that the kingdom is now, the kingdom is present, the kingdom is not only future, but it is present and in your midst. So he is there, and where the king goes, so goes the kingdom with them. So where he is, and he does live in our hearts, so the kingdom is present. Nevertheless, we pray with eager expectation for the final consummation and the answer of what we are instructed to pray for in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come. And if we are not doing all that we are capable of doing, of advancing that prayer, then we can only pray with hypocrisy. But then, he also approaches his disciples. He says different things to them about and he does present a gruesome picture to them when he pulls them aside. So he's addressing a different audience, and he tells them, for as the lightning that flashes out of one part of the heavens shines to the other part under the heavens, so also the Son of Man shall be in his day. Nobody's going to miss it. It's not going to catch anyone off guard. It's going to be of such dramatic intensity that it's going to be like lightning shining from the east all the way to the west, all across the sky. There's no way you're going to miss this event. You will know when it gets here, but a lot of painful things have to come to pass before that prayer is answered, and it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better as we approach that day. And he likens the generation that's going to be swallowed up in the second coming to the generation of Noah. They were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were giving in marriage until the day that Noah went into the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. So they're going to be going about their business, going about their lives, and then all these things that the Bible says will come to pass. They will be blissfully unaware until they are no more. So it'll be too late on the day that it comes. They could wish they could take it back over, but once the flood comes, that means the judgment is here. The people of Noah's generation could not escape the flood when it swept the earth. There's just no way around it. They all drowned, and it's going to be somewhat similar. There's a judgment of fire, which accompanies the second coming, or I think the new heaven and new earth. But he also does the same thing with Lot's generation. He's just going down through Genesis, and he says an important thing in the 32nd verse. Remember the wife of Lot. Lot, we don't know what her name was. She's just referenced as the wife of Lot, but she is in Genesis. What she does, she makes the fatal mistake of looking back when they were being rescued and redeemed from Sodom and Gomorrah, where they would have been reduced to smithereens, along with the other denizens of those ancient epicenters of iniquity. Classic case of Old Testament fire and brimstone judgment. And she looked back because she still was in love with her sin. She longed for it, and that's what Sodom represented. She looked back and she was turned into a pillar of salt. So that was the end of Lot's wife. And what does this mean to us? We have to leave the baggage of our sinful past behind us and never look back, but always look forward to the life and the hope and the expectation that we are advancing towards. Whoever seeks to save his life shall lose it, and whoever loses his life shall preserve it. This is the ultimate paradox, and if you value, treasure, and esteem your life on earth above all other things while you live it, you will forfeit that which you value most in eternity. So the paradox and the trick is to be willing, if necessary, to lay down your life for a friend. Greater love hath no man than this, and if we are willing to do it, then we are guaranteed the crown of the martyrs. But that's a difficult territory. I don't want to get anyone signing up for the path of the call of the martyr, because that's. But he does speak of a division on the day of judgment, just like the division about his message that comes and divides the homes asunder. So too does the judgment come. Two in the field are not going to. One's not going to make it. Two anywhere else, and one's not going to make it. So there is a division, and there are alternate outcomes to the day of judgment. And so we endeavor to be on the side that is spared of the wrath that is to come. And they answering said to him, Where, master? And he said to them, Where the body is, there also the vultures shall be gathered together. He paints them a pretty gruesome picture of the judgment which awaits those who are hellbound on the day that he arrives, the day that he returns. And what does it mean? Well, this day is that much closer. The apostles lived with the expectation that this day could come in their lifetimes, and we are that much closer than they, yet we have sort of lost the fire but, he could be coming any minute. He could be here soon. 18th chapter, first verse, Gospel of Luke. And he spoke a parable to them, that they should always pray and not lose heart. Parables is an instructive illustration which takes a relatable incident or scenario from everyday occurrence or nature, commonly observed phenomenon therein, and exalts it as a medium or a vehicle of transcendent or didactic truth. So from these images and illustration are imparted a moral lesson, and without a moral, it is not a parable. By definition, it is something else. So this parable is intended to stimulate in them the trait of persistency and perseverance in prayer. And prayer is not so simple as a one-and-done finality. You are not blessed for now and forever after simply by entering into a single prayer. Some fools pray and expect a lifetime of spend a moment in prayer and expect a lifetimes of blessings. But the best things in life are worth praying for. The best things in life are worth waiting for. And you can pray while you wait, and these things will come to pass if you do not lose heart, if you get distracted, if you get trapped up and distracted with worldly worry, if you forget to say your prayer out loud, then you have no one to blame but yourself, your own heart. Saying, In a certain city there was a certain judge, not revering Elohim, nor regarding man. This man was woefully unqualified to serve in the capacity, the judge that he did. He did not have the fear of Elohim or the concern for he did not love his fellow man or even concern them. He was privileged with power. He was a judge and he had authority, but he did not have the two things that every judge ought to have. One cannot be trusted to authority who is not submitted to authority. So a judge who does not fear Elohim is a dangerous judge to fear, and especially one who does not regard man. And if you don't fear or love Elohim, then you're not going to be able to love man. And the balance comes through our fear and our love. These are both necessary ingredients. And a widow was in that city, and she came to him, saying, Do right to me on my adversary. A widow, this vulnerable member of society, the outcast. Now Luke has an affectionate concern for the outcast, and in fact he does mention the widow more times than all the other Gospels combined. Yes, that is, and the Samaritans too. But the widow, they were supposed to be... Yahweh's tender affection and concern was supposed to be embedded in the Mosaic law, yet in spite of that, they circumvented that, and the widows were bereft of solutions. Now, this widow had three disadvantages. She was poor. She didn't have the resources to pay a bribe, even if she could. That would have gotten this unrighteous judge's attention a lot quicker, but she had to continually knock and harangue at his door where he lived, just not letting him go, because she wanted that she herself, because a woman could not be admitted into court. This was the second thing. So she was poor, she was a woman, and a woman's testimony could not be regarded in court in an ancient Palestinian court, so she was out of luck for representing herself. She needed a judge directly to do it because she couldn't represent herself in court, and she had no man to stand. So she was poor, she was a woman, and she was a widow. She had these things against her, but what she had was a heart and a fire and an intensity that just didn't die out and didn't diminish. She kept going on it all day, every day throughout the day. She bothered and pestered him until she got her request, in spite of the man's characteristics, his lack of concern for her welfare or her interest or her justice or anything else. He is petitioned persistently to do so, and he does so. And he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, even if I do not fear Elohim or regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I shall do right to her, lest by her continual coming she wears me out. So this woman just kept at it. She did not give up. She was there start to finish, and this judge knew it, and he knew what type of character he was. He knew better than else that he did not fear Elohim or regard his fellow man. He knew that, and he was familiar with his own character by sheer proximity. And just the pestering and the haranguing and just the living his life with the bother of this woman perpetually knocking at her door compelled him to just act out on her behalf, even though it was not in his nature to do justice or to execute justice or to administer justice. He was bothered by her continually haranguing, and now this character is presented in contrast to our loving Heavenly Father, who wants what's best for us, knows what's best for us, plans what's best for us. The problem is our plans often do get in the way. And then he gets to the heart of the matter in the 6th verse. And the master said, hear what the unrighteous judge said. And shall Elohim not do right by all means by his own chosen ones, whom are crying out day and night to him, and are being patient over them? So with Elohim, he is worlds away and worlds apart from this unrighteous judging character. He loves all his creation. He's concerned. He wants what's best for us. He knows what's best for us. He wants to answer your prayers. The problem is people don't pray to him at all, or they don't pray to him enough. So you cannot burden him or wear him out. There is no prayer that is beyond that. You are not straining him. You are not bothering him. He is willing and able to act on your behalf. That is contingent on the righteous nature of your request. So he will answer all the prayers of the saints, but that's what the chosen ones mean. But he is long-suffering even with the wicked. So he does give windows of repentance. That's why every sinner has not been swallowed with their life. They have their life intact and are free and able to go on. I say to you that he shall do right to them speedily. But when the Son of Man comes, how shall he find faith on the earth? So he connects it and brings us all the way back to the 17th chapter, the coming of the Son of Man. This is part of the arrival of the kingdom, the literal arrival of the kingdom, when he comes with sword in hand to expel and eliminate evil by the sword throughout the earth. And it's gonna, how much, this isn't just a one and done prayer thing. That's not what he's saying here. You still have to knock at the door, but if you are a friend or welcome guest, it's going to take 2 or 3 times for you to say the same thing to expect even anything remotely resembling a response from him. And that's just part of the prayer. It's a discipline. We have to continually go at it and just get better at it in the practice thereof, and then it'll become like second nature. It'll become like breathing once you finally get the hang of it. And remember, these parables are designed to, the moral they are designed to impart is to pray. This is the quantity of prayer, pray often, and the quality of prayer is the one we're going to cover next, the parable of the Pharisee and the publican. And he spoke this parable to some who relied on themselves that they were righteous and looking down on others. Who would ever do that? It's easy for us to look at and point the finger, but we all do know that he is addressing the Pharisees. They are not far from the mixed. So he answers this question of theirs in verse 20. Then he turns to the disciples and talks to them. And then he continues the same audience, but the Pharisees are not far away. They are still right there. They are in the same vicinity. We don't know quite where that is, but he is in marching on his way to Jerusalem from Galilee. That much we do know. But the Pharisees were they were content to rely on their own righteousness. Self-righteousness is a dangerous trap you don't want to get into. And looking down on others, we got to tenderly regard the image bearers, those who are endowed in the same image with which we bear, as equals and brothers, and not look down on them, not despise them, not dismiss them, not give up on them, but lend a helping hand if we are there, and if we are able, give them what we need if we have what they need. Two men went up to the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Two men identified as a Pharisee and a tax collector, and one of the most consistent things is that Yahweh always chooses the unlikeliest of characters to gain entrance, to have something significant happen in their life. We witnessed that from Genesis all the way to Revelation. But the tax collectors would have been despised. The publicans, they were traitors. They were an offense and an insult to loyal, patriotic Jews, because the way that they earned their living, and some of them were quite wealthy, was by extracting more taxes than were commanded and were minimally owed by their Roman masters. The Roman masters gave them license to fleece their own people, so you had to be a traitor to begin with to sign up for that job, and they were the despised. They worked for the Gentiles. Their contact with them made them ceremoniously suspect, and they were just the filth of society, and they are in a unique category of sinner. In the 15th chapter, we read that the sinners and publicans, that's because they were a unique category. They were the low. They were the reviled, the most reviled station in people. And the Pharisee, this is the one we would have thought would have performed the better prayer. But, he's upsetting the order. The Pharisees, they were devout, loyal, patriotic. They had a lot of good things for them, working for them, but the problem was that they were so wrapped up into this legalistic religion that they were worshiping the law, and not even the law. They were worshiping themselves, because they took it upon themselves to go above and beyond the law. So what we witness in here is so, for instance, this Pharisee fasted twice a week and gave tithes. Well, we'll save that thought for when he gets here. That's the 12th verse. But the point is that he went above and beyond what was commanded in the laws of Moses. Reading this, looking in his immediate audience, but it is identified that he was speaking this parable to them who relied on themselves, that they were righteous, self-righteous ones, one who saw there no need for any external righteousness from heaven, the one that really counts, the one that matters. We have to be clothed in his righteousness in order to get there. The Pharisee stood and began to pray with himself this way: Elohim, I thank you that I am not like the rest of men, swindlers, unrighteous adulterers, or even as this tax collectors. So he's praying at the temple, and Jews could go in the temple anytime and pray by themselves, but there were designated hours where this was public prayer, where people would have got up and said things out loud, and that is the indication, that is the incident here. This is the situation. So the Pharisee, he's got the platform, he's got the pedestal, and what does he say? He doesn't pray at all. He doesn't pray, he doesn't exalt or honor Elohim. He honors himself, and he does so at the expense of his fellow man. So he was not fearing Elohim because he was in his presence, he was in the temple, and he was the same character and mold of the unrighteous judge. So that tells you about the Pharisee, and he thinks he's exceptional, he thinks he's unique, he does not see humanity as a democracy. He thanks him that he is not like the rest of men, just swindlers, these thieves, these adulterers, those who are unrighteous, or even as this tax collector here. So he is pointing, he's saying, just general categories of despised, degenerate people that no one likes, respects, or admires, and then he points the fingers and casts the light on the publican. He's paying attention to him, so his eyes are not in heaven. He is, but the publican does not even raise his eyes to heaven. And then 12th verse, I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. So he's making note and drawing attention to the fact that now the Jews were commanded to fast once a year. That was the Day of Atonement. That was their Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. But the Pharisees were in the practice of fasting twice a week. Now, fasting is a spiritual discipline, one that is recommended, but not to be regularly practiced twice a week. That's just going too far, I think. Physical health, now we should not despise our bodies to fast twice a week, or even if you are in the practice of fasting, confine yourself to a schedule. But giving tithes, this was a good, loyal Jew. He not only gave the tithes of all that he acquired, but also all that he possessed. Not everything he earned, but all that he possessed, all that he acquired. He tithed that. He gave 10% of not only his income, but also his agricultural output, everything else. But, he stood on his own righteous. He was the same character of the people he was addressing who were in the midst. There were Pharisees in the midst who maybe wouldn't have said the exact same thing, but, were in agreement with what this man said. They were thanking, they thought the same thoughts in their heart that this man was saying out loud. But the tax collector, standing at a distance, would not even raise his eyes to the heavens, but was beating his breast, saying, Elohim, show grace unto me, a sinner. So the tax collector, he approaches him from the vantage point of abject humiliation and humility, whereas the Pharisees approaches him with arrogance and pride, and before a fall cometh the pride, so he leaves the place not justified, but the publican does leave so, because he says the right things. He is not reminding Elohim of what he did for him, what he does for him every week, fasting twice a week, and just been giving tithe. He's aware, he confesses that he is a sinner, and so too is this Pharisee. And what he's doing is he is using the fact that he goes above and beyond that which is required of the Mosaic law to fast twice a week and give tithes of all that I have. He could have gotten away with maybe giving it on the income, that which he earned. But he's got the wrong idea, because he presumes to be in Yahweh's debt, or Yahweh in his debt, because he did all these things too. We have to confess out loud, and he is using the fact that he did these things to mask the sins that he did. So he may have, the danger and temptation when looking at sin is to hate the ones that we do not do, but to love the ones that we do. So the sins that he is against are swindlers, adulterers, and adultery is one of the things that most people don't do. So most people like to point out the adulterers, but it's a grievous sin. I'm certainly not endorsing it, but it is just a sin, same as every other sin. But this he was a swindler. He may have gotten ill, but he's aware of the fact that he is a sinner. So he approaches him and he gets straight to the problem. He goes, at the heart of every problem is the problem of the heart. So he does not even deign to make eye contact with the one, but he says it out loud. He's publicly praying. He's beating his breast, and he's asking for grace. That is the one thing we all need, the one thing we cannot produce ourselves, the one thing we do not merit. Unto me, a sinner. So you have to never lose sight of the fact that you are a sinner. You cannot brag or boast about what you did for him in the day. You have to come to him certainly by the end of the day at latest, if you are aware of the fact that you sin, and you just got to let it out loud. I say to you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who is exalting himself shall be humbled, and he who is humbling himself shall be exalted. So from opposite outlooks spring opposite outcomes. If you are prideful, you will be debased. If you are humble, you will be exalted. Prideful people try to artificially and unnaturally exalt themselves to the desired degree of exaltation, but they are in the hands, and they are pawns in the judgment scheme in the hands of Elohim, who is omnipotent and sovereign. And he says that if we have the attitude of the publican, who though he did probably more despicable deeds than the Pharisees, but at least he was aware of the fact, and he said it, and he asked for mercy, and he didn't exalt himself at the expense of other people. What was this man even doing praying if he was so good and so righteous? What need is there for God when you fast twice a week and give tithes of all you have? But he is humiliated, and because he lacks the elusive virtue of humility, humility is one of the virtues that are so elusive, because once we become aware of it, that's when we lose it. But it is etymologically rooted in the same root word as humiliated. They both spring from Latin word humus, which translates as earth or ground. So a down-to-earth person will not need the external act of humiliation. They will have the grace naturally and properly. And verse 15, and they also brought infants to him to touch them, but his disciples, seeing it, rebuked them. So the they that the disciples are rebuking are the parents of these children. They're the ones bringing their infants to him, their young children, for him just to touch them, just to bless them. But the disciples, they jealously guarded his access, his presence, and they didn't think that children were important enough. Children had no social standing in the ancient world, but they are dear and tender, and especially regarded. They are beloved, especially in the hands of the Creator. And that's exactly who he was. But Yahshua called to them and said, let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of Elohim. So we have a window in children of the traits we are to cultivate on the path to the kingdom of heaven. They are artless, their simplicity, their perfect trust, their pure love are all traits. Now, when we look at children, we see two different visions. One is the angelic, and the other is the bad one, the spoiled child. Children are naturally undisciplined, so they need discipline. So we are called to be childlike, but not childish. The distinction is important. Where we are not called to be childish is 1 Corinthians 13 and somewhere in 14:20. But so, we cannot retreat to childhood at the expense of the reality of maturity, but we have to approach them and look to them and learn from them. From the blank slate of their faith is admirable to behold, their perfect trust and their perfect love that they have. The child is an artless, natural, gifted believer. They have not acquired the sophistication which doubts, so doubt really accrues once we reach the maturity of age. But children, even if they are destined to become non-believers, are exemplary believers in their childlike state. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of Elohim as a little child shall certainly not get into it. He lays it on the line. He makes it perfectly clear that if you do not do this thing, if you do not embrace and learn and emulate from the spirit of the childlike awe and wonder at the object of your faith, then you're not gonna make it. You're not gonna make it into his wing, because he gathers. That is one image of salvation he uses in Luke's account of a hen gathering her young under his wing. So you will not enter into it, and you're not going to make it. And it's seriously that simple. So pay attention, because you want to make it, but you're not going to make it if you do not look and learn and live like a child without being childish. It's a delicate balancing act, but both the balance and the whole are necessary. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.